Yeah, the thoughts that you guys have are short but underdeveloped. So what I want you to do is whatever point you make, maybe try to anchor yourself in the text a little bit, right? Provide a quote from the text to back up your point, whatever that is. So like let's say for instance you're like, I don't think Beowulf is really having a great historical or a hero's journey, right? He never faces conflict. He's like an original Mary Sue type of character, right? Right. If you say that, back it up, right? Give me some specific evidence, whether in the form of a quote or actually just specific evidence. So you don't want to just kind of shoot from the hip and give a claim without giving some proof for your claim. So that's what a well-developed paragraph or two looks like, right? I mean, you're making a point, but you're also anchoring yourself in the text. So this is a 200 level course. This is no more 100 level course BS. All right, this is for real. So you know, I'm expecting great things from you guys. You guys are a sharp group, so I want to make sure you guys are doing your best work. Okay. I'll give you a little bit of slack on this one because I was a little late posting the questions. So I'll give you a little bit of slack on this one. All right. But now forward, well-developed paragraph or two with some quotes. Okay. Questions about that? Anything that I can address about my expectations for these before class responses?
No, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Okay, good, good. I'm not picking on any one person. All of you guys aren't developing them enough, right? So I just wanted to make that clear from the early get-go that need a bit more than what we're doing. Okay. Yeah, those are always hard things to articulate because you guys have all had online classes, Zoom classes. You know, you sometimes think, I bet the professor doesn't read these things, right? Sometimes they probably don't, right? But I, I do, especially for these classes, because it helps me plan for our conversation that we're getting ready to have. That's why I have you do them. Okay, so the more you develop and articulate, even the better our conversations will be. All right, so now I'll get the Sir Gawain and Green Knight questions up right after class. I don't have to refamiliarize myself with that one. I know that one really well, so I'll get you some questions up right after class on that one. So other than that, we can go ahead and get started. Finishing talking about Beowulf. A lot of you guys weren't as impressed with the second day as of Beowulf, with Grendel's mother and with the dragon, right? As you were with Grendel. Like I told you guys last time, Grendel was the villain that this thing is known for, right? For various reasons. Um, Grendel's mother and the dragon, right? They're both interesting antagonists in their own right. But are they as cool as Grendel, right? Maybe not. Maybe not here. So let's see. Leah, I will call on you. You said that you talked about how both characters were interesting antagonists on their discussion board. You want to, you do me a favor and articulate why? Why do you thought these were interesting characters for Beowulf to end his arc? I don't know if you or your mic's muted, so I don't know if that's if you want to chime in here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
Did I pronounce your name right, by the way?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I think they were interesting because they just kind of came out of nowhere. You didn't really expect them, you know?
Right.
And they both had really good reasons to terrorize. It just didn't come out of nowhere like Grendel. Grendel's mother, she was upset, so I don't blame her for that. And the dragon had something stolen from him, so I'd be pretty upset about that too. So yeah, both good characters to bring in.
Yeah, very very good points there. Like, can you really be too mad at Grendel's mother? Right, even her son is a piece of crap, right? But still, it's her son, right? So
I think that's what makes the like best antagonists is ones where you can like see a motive behind them and stuff. Like, well, I know it's a little bit completely different, but I'm a huge like Marvel fan and stuff, and with the movies and stuff, you had like a reasoning, like it wasn't a good motive, but Thanos still made a good motive of why you still could resemble with them on why they would do that, even though they shouldn't have, like the dragon shouldn't have burned down the whole entire village basically over a piece of treasure that he had liked, but
right. So good antagonists aren't black and white, right? They do have some motivations that we could perhaps sympathize with, like
I
Thanos.
thought it was really interesting that a woman was Beowulf's second foe, because in a way I felt like they sold her short. Can't remember the exact lines, but when it's describing her coming to the place and attacking people, it talks about she wasn't as feared as Grendel. But I feel like a lot of times, especially today, people don't want to mess with a mother. Like, definitely, I think that is one of the worst wraths you can unleash, is messing with someone's kid. And I think that it was interesting that while they still found her fit to go against Beowulf, who was, had all this godly power that was set apart from men, they still yet sold her short in that way.
So you don't think that the poet developed Grendel's mother enough as a character?
No, I don't think so. I wish we had more of a real description of her, because it claimed that she was also had the Mark of Cain, but it didn't specify as how. And just left me wondering, how could a pretty normal woman be described as a monster, and then how could have a monster as a child? Like, it just left me wondering a lot of things.
Right. What do some of the rest of you guys think? Bouncing off of Nicole, do you think that Grendel's mother had a lot of development, or maybe not enough? Aaliyah said that sure, she could sympathize with her motivation for wanting to get revenge, right? But did the poet build in your mind why she would be a formidable second foe to you? Any of you want to chime in here?
I definitely wish that they would have described the characters a little bit more, other than like they're just monsters, because what's their story? Like, I want to know why they are considered monsters. So I wish that they would have developed the story a little bit better, but
I agree with that, Kelsey. I also really wish, thinking back on everything I said, I wish that we could have felt a little bit of Grendel's mother's pain. I think that would have helped us understand her motivation a bit more. I wish that it would have went into that and just developed that a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of wonder, did any of that emotion get lost in translation? I definitely wish, I don't know, I wish that I could understand Old English, because I feel like it would have created a better emotional story.
I 100% agree with you on that. I know it would have, because I feel like a lot was lost in translation. Back to what y'all was talking about the character. I think the biggest detriment to the story is not going into dealing with the Christian roots as far as the market. That stuff's super interesting to me. And if they would have developed that a little bit better than ham-fisted it in there, I think it would have been awesome. It could have been really epic.
Was it you who somebody mentioned on the discussion board that this reminded you of Tolkien, the Hobbit?
Oh, I did with the dragon, and I know Tolkien came after this, so he might have drawn inspiration from this story.
Yeah, I was going to say Tolkien actually translated Beowulf. He did one of the
Oh, really?
he did one of the first translations of it. So I think you're right to point out the similarities there.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the trope of the Dragon Guard and the Horde.
Right. I think Seamus Heaney, the poet Seamus Heaney, the Irish poet who died just a few years ago, I think he did this particular translation that we have. Yeah, worth some things lost in translation? Probably so, right? I have some experience reading Old English. I was in an Old English reading group in grad school with a medievalist. And yeah, a lot of their vocabulary, they have a lot much different vocabulary than we did. Like I said, all the words about glory and honor and all these types of things, right? So there's only so many ways in our modern language that we can say, give these concepts, glory, these different types of glory and honor. They had lots more words for this type of thing.
I'd be curious what y'all think. Every time I heard the word weird, and I think the Cliff Notes said it was like evil, but it kind of breaks that immersion because it's such a contradictory to how we understand that word.
I agree with that. It just pulled me out of, being in the story. I'd be in it and I'd be reading, and then I just get stuck on the word weird, and I'd be like, weird? Huh?
Yeah, me too.
I'd be like, the use of that word is weird.
Yeah, whenever we think about weird in fiction, right, we might think of something like Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft or something like that, right? So, yeah.
I'd love to have a class on H.P. Lovecraft.
And you'll have, if you don't have anything to do on Tuesdays, Thursdays, you should join one of my classes here in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to talk about the Call of Cthulhu one day. Right, so he's an interesting writer to talk about in any class because he was so racist, right? So how
yeah, he was he as racist as what they want to make you think? Was he?
He was. Yeah.
That's unfortunate because that draws, you know what I mean? That's so it's hard to deal with.
Yeah, a lot of that fueled his fiction, right? That's why his monsters are so scary, because a lot of them are fears of different races and stuff that he threw into them.
One thing that caught my eye when it was talking about Beowulf, going to the pool to confront Grendel's mother, that really just stood out to me when it described his ring mail. I think one of the last times it described it was in 1536 to 1555. And then it goes into it a lot before that. When I was looking at that, it also made a lot of allusions to the Lord. It made me think that, the ring mail itself was kind of a symbol for, the armor of God. I don't know if y'all have read the Bible a lot, but in there, I can't remember where exactly, talks about armoring yourself with the gospel. And I felt that allusion a lot in that portion of the text.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I didn't even think of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right to point that out. Armor isn't quite. In a lot of these stories, you're not supposed to take them literally, right? There is a lot of metaphor here. So yeah, Beowulf is like this holy warrior almost within this retelling within the Christian tradition, right, that we have.
I think he reminds me of Achilles. I swear I do. Like I talked about in my discussion about it, I feel like his main goal was immortality, and not in the mortal form, but in as far as being remembered forever. His deeds will always be remembered. He had that monument built for him. That was so important to him on his deathbed.
I agree with that. I think it's really interesting when you look at the Christianization of this text, because, a lot of times in the Bible and in Christianity, pride and vanity is viewed as a negative trait. And with Beowulf, it's kind of uplifted in a way. And I just think it's a very interesting thing.
It's super antithetical to Christianity. It's weird.
Yeah, the passage I just looked at the passage you gave us, Nicole. Is of course what you said. He says, "A man must act so when he means in a fight to frame himself a long-lasting glory. It is not life he thinks of." So, right, honor and glory, right? Like a heavy metal song here, a man of war song, right? That's kind of what Beowulf reminds me of in this case. You guys want to keep talking? Let's since you started this thread, let's talk about it more. The Christianization of the poem, right? So you guys know that a dragon is often associated with
Lucifer.
Satan, right? You guys were right also to point out some other tropes regarding dragons, right? They're hoarders of gold, right? That's a trope, and that often is a metaphor for we shouldn't hoard our wealth, right? You know, we should spend our money more.
If I recall correctly, though, there's a line in there. I forget what it is. Forgive me, but this is afterwards. It says something about only who was blessed by God could actually touch that gold and have it for themselves. That in and of itself is kind of strange to me. You know, just gold and God, or the Jesus God, that just does not go together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, it didn't make sense to me when, before that, it went into how the gold got there. And it talks about the people who have died out now, who placed it there. I didn't feel a great Christian influence on them and a reason for that curse to be on the gold. I just did not understand why it was there, aside from, sprinkling in some Christian sentiments.
I don't think they really explained the curse too much, did they? Because I was wondering that myself.
No, I don't remember what line it was, but they really didn't go into it very much. It was kind of just like, oh yeah, there's a curse, and then it just goes on.
Right, and you guys are right. The poet doesn't go too deep into it. Right, it's probably a translation, or it's a mixing of cultures. Right, Anglo-Saxon culture would have been, they would have taken that for granted, but then Christian values and Anglo-Saxon culture really don't mix so well.
Another thing.
About,
you go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, even talking about curses, it said that Grendel's mother and him both had the Mark of Cain, which is what was believed to be what God placed on Cain after he killed Abel, as like either a mark of protection or a curse. And some people believe that it could be leprosy, because that even be how he lost his arm and maybe was described to be a monster.
Right.
I think it could be perceived that way. I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And also, I had to read a book for my history class called Life in Year One. And in there, it talks about leprosy a little bit. Leprosy in the time of the Bible wouldn't have been what we know it as today. Then it would have been any kind of skin condition, anything that just looked icky, that just looked bad or wrong. And I think that definitely can, be important as far as Grendel and his mother. I think that could be what sets them apart.
Right, and because even in those times, like, they were shamed for having those skin defects or whatever it may be. The townspeople were told to not be near them or to look away from them.
Right. It's definitely interesting that you bring that up, Kara, because that's an interesting way of reading this text through that lens of disability that we talked about. Right? Is Grendel a monster? Right, because he's different, right? Because his body is different in some type of way. He does kill. Well, he does kill, right? But at the same time, right? Maybe he has a mental disability, right, or something like that. It would be interesting to see an adaptation of Beowulf if they played it off that way. I think just to try to stir sympathy for the villain.
Well, I'm sure him being told he was a monster his whole entire existence didn't help either. So, I mean, obviously he's going to feel like he was a monster by then. So he's like, well, if I'm gonna be a monster, might as well act like one, is what I thought he might have thought of. So
If he was born a monster, you could argue that he's not even evil, because everybody's a hero in their own story. From his point of view, humans are evil. You could look at it that way.
Right, like we talked about the other day, he's just sitting around minding his own business, right? He's playing some video games, right? Then here come these raucous college kids having a party, right? So yeah.
That even plays into Nicole's thought of, if she was a normal woman, how did she have the monster for her kids?
I think looking through the disability lens, it makes a lot more sense, because, if she had some kind of mental or physical deformity or disability that could have been passed on to him, that could have been what made them monsters. And it also, it makes me think, does their treatment, the way that everyone else treated them, justify their actions? Like, do two wrongs make a right? And goes into that. That's what it makes me wonder.
Remember the word for that lake that the monster's lair, but I was wondering if there's any symbolism in behind of why that's used as that. I think it was called the mire. I could be wrong about that. I can't remember honestly. But you have to
I think it was the mire.
You have to dive in there, and then you find a like an alcove in the water, and then it's a cave, and then you resurface. You can breathe that. That's a weird layer. I wonder if that means anything really.
Well, this is bouncing off of your question. This is a good time to talk about the hero story myth. I think I think it was you, Dale, that mentioned Joseph Campbell the other day. I'm being a very bad scholar here and showing you the Wikipedia page, so forgive me for my sins right ahead of time. Let me share my screen. So we could talk through these different stages of the hero's journey, at least through part 1 and 2. We can kind of figure out, does Beowulf meet all these steps? The question you just asked, Dale, about what's up with the water, I think probably has something to do with this.
Road of trials.
Right. Even the crossing of the threshold, maybe. But this is something that we can keep in mind the more stuff we read too. Ask yourself, do you think there is a universal hero story? And this book was called Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it came out, I think Campbell wrote it in the 50s, 60s or something like that. But this is a very influential book about mythology.
This one right here.
Yep, you have it there. Hero. Have you ever read through it, Dale?
I've read about a third of it so far. I've got a lot I need to catch up on, tons of backlog books.
Yeah, it's a very dense book. It's very, the man was brilliant, right? It's very dense, but it's a very rewarding read if you ever want to take it up. But he argues that all these hero stories have the same kind of motifs, the same kind of traits, give or take a trait here and there, right? Sometimes a story won't do something, sometimes it will. But so I'll walk you through these steps briefly. It says the first step is the call to adventure, right? As it says, the hero begins in a situation of normality from which some information is received that acts as a call to head off into the unknown. According to Campbell, this region is represented by a distant land, a forest, a kingdom underground, beneath the waves or above the sky, a secret island, lofty mountaintop, or dream state. But it is a place of strangely fluid and polymorphous beings, unimaginable torments, superhuman deeds, and impossible delight. Beowulf seems to check out right here, right? He gets the call to adventure from a distant land, right? The land of the Geats, right? He goes to see the Dane. I think, Beowulf's Geat, right? He goes to the Danes.
Yeah, he ends up being the king of the Geats, I think.
Yeah, eventually.
Sometimes the hero, definitely not with this story, right? But sometimes after that call to adventure is heard, the hero first maybe refuses to do it, right? Maybe the hero has some kind of doubt early, refuses to take the call.
Yeah, because doesn't Beowulf instead defer the throne to the previous king's nephew before he takes it?
Yeah, but when he does that, it's almost construed as that being very noble of him to do that. He doesn't like seek power in that essence.
Yeah, I agree, because it talks about him actually not fostering, but kind of mentoring to that king until he was ready.
Yeah, you guys were talking about pride a minute ago, right? Maybe that's an argument against what some of you guys were saying, right? About pride.
That was the only time in the story where I would agree, argue that you're right. That's one of the most noble things he does in the whole story that I can remember. Because even when he goes and fights stuff and wants to do it on his own, I don't think it's necessarily to save his kinfolk. It's just he wants to be the one remembered for that action.
I agree. You know, I didn't even really think of deferring the throne to the nephew as being humble until just now. I hadn't even realized that in the story.
Right? He's all about his military deeds, right? He could care less, it seems, about having power in a political sense, which is interesting. But continuing with our hero story, sometimes the hero refuses the call at first, so that provides some conflict to the plot. Beowulf doesn't, right? He's like, hell yeah, let's go kill some monsters.
But normally something has to happen in most stories to persuade that person to end up doing what the narrative needs them to do.
Yeah, Star Wars famously takes this formula, right? George Lucas even admitted, yeah, I read that book and helped me write the screenplay for this thing called Star Wars, right? But you guys remember Luke Skywalker refuses the call at the beginning of Star Wars, right? He's like, I don't know about this, Obi-Wan. It seems a little far-fetched. But then he goes back and sees Uncle Owen and his family killed, right? So that's when he's like, I guess I will take the call to adventure now.
I have never seen any of the Star Wars movies, so I don't know, but I believe you.
I just watched them for the first time like a couple weeks ago, and let me tell you, I went in thinking I'm not gonna like this. This isn't really what I'm into, but I watched it and I was totally into it. I was like, I need to finish this ASAP.
I'll definitely have to watch them then.
What order did you watch them in?
Like from like the old ones to the newer ones.
Right. And you know exactly the reference I'm making from part 4, right? Where he refuses the call at first, but then goes back and finds his family murdered.
Yeah.
On Tatooine.
Right, on Tatooine. Sometimes the hero has supernatural aid, right? Especially in myth, like if you go back and read these Greek myths, oftentimes the gods are getting involved in the affairs of men somehow or other, right?
A lot of times the heroes are half gods themselves too in those stories.
Achilles definitely was, right? He was a demigod, right? His only weakness, of course, being his heel.
Perseus was too. I think Zeus was his father.
Right. The next point is called the crossing of the threshold, right? This is when the hero crosses into the unknown, some sort of unknown realm, right? Beowulf does this both times, right? With Grendel and Grendel's mother, right? He has to cross over into this unfamiliar setting in which to face this conflict, right? Crosses the threshold. And I think the question you asked Dale about what was going on with Grendel's mother in that lake, right? I think that's what that. I think that's kind of what that was, right? It was this threshold that he had to cross through,
Yeah, and I guess you could call her later the belly of the whale.
right?
That's what I was thinking when I was reading that part just now.
It says the person shows willingness to undergo a metamorphosis when first entering the stage. A hero may encounter a minor danger or setback. Campbell says the idea that the passage of the threshold is a transit into a sphere of rebirth is symbolized in the worldwide womb image of the belly of a whale. The hero, instead of conquering or conciliating the power of the threshold, swallowed into the unknown and would appear to have died. So that's kind of what, if we go off of that, right? That's kind of what that the waters being so murky, right? Beowulf's almost like going back into the womb here.
Well, and also it goes back to the soldiers waiting for him's perspective, and they think he died, if I remember correctly.
You're exactly
And
right.
you're right. The water's churning. It's murky and bloody.
And some of them even leave. The only ones that stay are his crew that he handpicked. And on the topic of rebirth, I didn't realize this when I was first reading through. I feel like when his sword melts after he slices into Grendel's mother, and when he gets the new sword, I feel like that honestly can kind of represent a kind of rebirth.
Right. Yeah. Explain how. Explain how so.
Well, the first sword that he brought in didn't work against her. He couldn't use that one. And then he picks up this mighty, ancient sword. I think they said that it was like crafted by giants or something.
Yeah, you're right.
And he uses that and it melts away. And I think that honestly could kind of represent a little bit of his transformation, because that's the first time that he faced any kind of difficulty in any of his battles with his foes. That's the first time that he wasn't successful at the very, very beginning, where he actually had to be away.
Why do you think that Beowulf just didn't try to take Grendel's mother with his hands like he did Grendel?
Now that honestly, I'm really not sure.
I think when I read this, I kind of felt like the difficulty level kept like getting higher. Like Grendel was easy, and then the next level was his mom, and it was harder, and then the dragon like actually kills him. So the difficulty just kept getting worse.
And when he took on Grendel and he didn't use a weapon, didn't he kind of equate that to being because Grendel himself didn't use a weapon and wanting to be on even playing fields?
Yes, I think you're right about that.
Then since that, I guess he must have viewed Grendel's mother as a bit more of a difficult foe than Grendel himself.
It's interesting just because we don't get, she's so ambiguous, right? We don't really get this description of her powers or what she can do.
That's what I was going to say. It's very vague and ambiguous, like you said. You never understand what she's capable of, really. The dragon gets a little bit more detail, the fire drake, but yeah, not her. Not that I remember.
If you got continuing this thread, this might help give us some perspective on the mother. Next part's the road, so we could kind of maybe take this so far through when he first goes into Grendel's mother's lair, right? Second part of the journeys, we start with a road of trials. This is a series of trials that the hero must undergo to begin a transformation. So Beowulf goes through a lot of these. This doesn't always follow this linear order. That's something else I should probably mention about this myth. It doesn't always follow this linear order. These are just patterns that emerge. But Beowulf does go through roads of trials, right? The whole thing at the beginning where he gets into the swimming contest, right? That's a trial that he undergoes. The whole journey down to the bottom of the lake where Grendel's mother is, right? That's a trial. It takes him an entire 24 hours to swim to the bottom of the lake, right? So that's a trial of sorts, right? So he's a hero always has to go through these obstacles to get to where they need to go. Sometimes the hero gets a meeting with a goddess who kind of helps them along in the journey. Campbell says the ultimate adventure is commonly represented as a mystical marriage of the triumphant hero's soul with the queen goddess of the world. This is the crisis of the nadir, the zenith, or at the uttermost edge of the earth, at the central point of the cosmos, in the tabernacle of the temple, within the darkness of the deepest chamber of the heart. So maybe this might not be applicable here, right? Beowulf doesn't really meet a goddess or go through something like that.
Hey, now in the film adaptation, they really sexualize his mother, and if I remember right, she's even a temptress.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this Dale. I was going to mention that, right? The next part's the woman as temptress. Hero faces the temptation, often as a physical or pleasurable nature that may lead him to abandon or stray from his quest. It says it doesn't necessarily have to be represented by a woman, but it often is. Woman is a metaphor for the physical or material temptations of life, since the hero knight was often tempted by lust in the spiritual journey. So you're right. Those of you who've seen the movie, this is a good time to talk about the movie adaptation, right? I didn't get a chance to rewatch it this weekend, by the way. I will though. But I do remember that about the movie. Like Angelina Jolie plays Grendel's mother, right? She just like walks around naked the whole time, right? She doesn't seem that scary, right? Yeah, but that's what it is. That's what she's doing. She's tempting Beowulf.
And if I remember correctly, in the movie, doesn't she give birth to the dragon? Like, I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen it, but isn't that like how in the movie they, introduce the dragon?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I read something like that. It was the dragon's Beowulf's and Grendel's mother's kid.
So the dragon is Beowulf and Grendel's mother's kid in the movie.
Oh, that might be right. I can't remember.
I think so. I could be wrong, but I feel like I remember it.
Interesting.
Has anybody watched the live action one? I seen one that was live action that like had real people in it and everything. I didn't know if it was any good or not. I seen it was like on, I don't know what it was on, but I seen it and I was wondering, I was waiting to watch, but I didn't know if it was good or not.
I haven't seen it. I know of it though. It has the guy from Highlander in it. If you guys have ever seen the Highlander films, he plays Beowulf, I think.
The same guy that plays Raiden in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, that guy plays Raiden, right? Christopher Lambert.
Yeah, Christopher Lambert. Yeah,
he plays Beowulf.
The
movie sounds awesome just because of that. So, right. So,
do y'all know what is that on a streaming service? That Netflix, Amazon, or?
I think it's on Crackle if you want the truth, because I think I was just looking it up too to see, because I was looking for the animated one and it showed that one on Crackle and I clicked on it. I didn't like watching it, but I don't think it has the part where he fights the dragon from what the description says. It just has him fighting Grendel and his mother.
I think somebody said last week the animated one's on Crackle. I think somebody said that last week too. It would be really cool if we got a really good adaptation of this. Like, I don't think we really have had that yet.
I feel like they could make this text into an amazing movie if they had the right amount of loyalty to the text and also adapted a few things. I feel like it would be fabulous.
It would be a good Netflix mini series. I think that would be a good format for it, even more than a 2-hour movie.
As long as they don't try to push politics or identity politics for that matter. That's taken over Hollywood. It's awful.
Right. Well, I mean, we talked about the new Star Wars last time, Dale. Like that seemed to be a lot of the. I would argue that was a little bit of a problem with the newest ones. Right?
That was huge. You could really see that they had an agenda for that. And I always argue, you can have great women heroes. I mean, Ripley, even Wonder Woman. You know what I mean? It can be done well. She has no character development, no flaws, just a terrible character. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with her being a female. I hate that that's, this misogyny is the first thing that people want to go to.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Right. I don't think she was well developed.
I agree.
All right, so let's to finish this out. The next part's called the Atonement with the Father. It says the hero must confront and be initiated by whatever holds the ultimate power in his life. In many myths and stories, this is the father or a father figure who has life and death power. This is the center point of the journey. All the previous steps have been moving into this place. All that follow will move out from it. Although this step is most frequently symbolized by an encounter with a male entity, it does not have to be a male, just someone or thing with incredible power. So Campbell says atonement consists in no more than an abandonment of that self-generated double monster, the dragon thought to be God, the superego. So he's getting into Freud terms. And the dragon thought to be sin, represented as id. This requires an abandonment of the attachment to ego itself, and that's why it is difficult. One must have a faith that the Father is merciful and then a reliance on that mercy. Therewith, the center of belief is transferred outside of the bedeviling God's tight, scaly ring, and the dreadful ogre is dissolved. It is in this ordeal that the hero may derive hope and assurance from the helpful female figure, whose magic he is protected through all the frightening experience of the father's ego-shattering initiation. It is impossible to trust the terrifying father face, and one's faith must be centered elsewhere. And with that reliance for support, one endures the crisis only to find in the end that the father and mother reflect each other and are in essence the same. So it's interesting that Campbell brings up a dragon here for this step. Right? If we're going to take if we're putting this through the lens of Christianity, right? The Father, he's almost atoning with God here, right? In this final stage with the dragon, right? Do you guys think that Beowulf abandons his ego at this last point? Arguably, maybe not, right? Because he does want to go face this dragon alone. I think one of you guys mentioned on the discussion board he could have brought in his soldiers with him, but he didn't. All right. So does he abandon his ego here in fighting this dragon?
Absolutely.
I agree. Upon first reading it, I didn't think so. But, I marked a couple passages to go back and look at and look further into. And I think it was lines 2,441 to 2,459, where he talks about, if he had an heir, he wanted all the wealth and all of his lands to be left to him. I think that that was a big part of letting his ego go. And I think that it was him acknowledging that all of this glory, all of this wealth, all of this honor that he had achieved really wasn't worth it when you didn't have family and friends to share it with, is what it was to me. What do you all think?
Somebody else is going to chime in a second ago. Who was it?
I mean, I'll let y'all talk. I don't think he ever really felt that way.
I think that, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know, but I feel like when he was older, that he came into the battle, like, to fight the dragon, like he probably thought himself that this could be his last battle. So, I think he wanted to go out, a noble way by, if this is his last battle, everybody always wants to go out, fighting the big dragon or something. So I think he wanted to, some part of his ego was there because he wanted to afterwards, if he did survive or if he did die, he'd still be looked up as this big hero that saved the village and stuff.
Hey, I can get behind that. It's interesting you brought up him wanting to go out that way because a lot of pagan beliefs, especially in Viking culture, they were all about dying in battle. To them, anything less was, they had a chance of going to Helheim instead of Valhalla. So, I could see that for sure there.
I agree. And you have to think like this is 50 years after him fighting Grendel's mother. So like he has definitely aged and he was probably definitely thinking about that.
Right, his body wasn't quite what it once was. Right, he in that old of an age.
I still think a lot of it though. After it's all said and done, he ultimately has to be saved. And it was a kinsman. I don't know if it was related or what he was exactly to him, but even still, his ultimate desire at the end was to see his treasure hoard again, and then to have that monument built. And to me, that says something.
Right. Well, this next stage might build off of what you just said here, Dale. And that's the Apotheosis. Right, and the ultimate boon. The Apotheosis is the point at which a greater understanding of the world and how it works is achieved. Armed with this new knowledge and perception, the hero is resolved and ready for the most difficult part of the adventure. So maybe if we're taking Beowulf here, right? Maybe he realizes that death is inevitable, right? He can't forever escape it. But the ultimate boon is what comes at the end of the journey. It says it's the achievement of the goal of the quest. It's what the hero went on the journey to get. All the previous steps serve to prepare and purify the hero for this step. Since in many myths, the boon is something transcendent like the elixir of life itself or a plant that supplies immortality or the holy grail. So the boon in this case might be the treasure, right? The fact that this is what he fought for, right? He fought for all this. Should we interpret the treasure literally even, right? Maybe it's going to be like the treasure that supplies his people, right, for the next 100 years, right? So
You think that him killing this dragon, he could have thought like it solidified his legacy maybe, and that could have been his ultimate. The moon was like wanting to be the best of the best.
Yeah, I think that definitely has something to do with it, right? I'll go back to the normal screen. I think it has something to do with it. Hence his desire for such a large like funeral pyre type of send out that he gets, right?
I think it was fitting in a way that he didn't get to live and enjoy the riches and everything that he had gained and the reputation. Because of course he had one in his life, but like Jacob said, killing that dragon was definitely what solidified it and what everyone probably remembered him for. And he didn't get to live to see it. He just died, and that was the end of his journey.
Right. So why would you say that that's poetic even?
I think it's poetic because, as everyone said, he did not show any kind of, he didn't have to face his vanity or his pride. And I think that getting to enjoy his success would have been the reward for that.
Right. Yeah, the boon in this case represents something greater, right? Maybe his own self peace that he gets, right? So maybe he doesn't need to enjoy the gold. Right? The gold represents his peace. If we're taking this Campbell reading of it into question. What do you guys think of this idea now that we're finished talking about it? Do you think Campbell's right? Do you think most hero stories do have these common patterns that we're talking about?
I mean, I do for sure, but I'm biased probably. I like it.
Right.
I think a lot of the classic stories really stuck to it almost religiously, but I think the ones today not really break, but kind of reorder the pattern a bit and explore it in new lenses and in new ways.
Well, it's interesting too because this is a very male dominated paradigm that he gives here, right? For male heroes, how it works for a female heroine is interesting. Like, how do you spin this, this for a female character, right? Do they go through the temptations with, with the, it's called tempted by the goddess, right? But do they go through that? So it's interesting that it's a very male dominated paradigm as well. Of course, most myth is very male dominated, right? You don't really see a lot of myths with that aren't, just frankly, right? Maybe not in Western tradition, at least. I can't speak for Eastern tradition. Any other thoughts? The hero, Jacob, you said you were a Marvel fan. You see this showing up in some of these Marvel movies that you like?
Yes, I see it. I see it a lot, especially in the end game. How you see that all Captain America wanted was to dance with the woman that he loved, but never got the chance to. And you see that he goes back in time and actually gets what he always wanted ever since the first Avenger. He got, and the same thing as Tony Stark, Iron Man. I mean, no, necessarily that he didn't want to leave his family and stuff, but he burdened himself down for losing, Peter Parker and all of that. And I think at the end, him sacrificing for him, for everybody, and Cap getting what he wanted was their ultimate boon. And I think that's how, and I think that was part of, what made the Marvel series so good, is because it went through each, like, it had so many heroes that you could see as like having the ultimate goal at the end and stuff.
Yeah, each one.
Yeah, Chris Pratt's character, Star-Lord, he has a typical hero's journey too, especially in the second movie of the Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
The atonement with the Father is definitely a step in the second movie, right? It's very obvious in that movie. If that's a step.
Yeah, it's on the nose. It's literal.
Yeah.
Hey, bringing up Star Wars real quick, though, Luke Skywalker his character is so well done, because this is what I don't really like about Beowulf's character. Luke, he really goes through a lot. You know what I mean? And then he actually loses in the second film. Yes, they get away. Well, I mean, it's that's the fifth episode.
Mhm.
Empire Strikes Back is the one I'm referring to. He actually, he loses his arm. He gets, wrecked by his dad, and then he gets to come back from that. You know what I mean? Like, there's actually suffering in that story, a lot of it. And it's well done. That's why that character is so compelling still to this day. That's
Right,
why,
because it shows humanity in him. Like, even though he has all of these, like, other features, like, he definitely shows humanity in that way.
yes, absolutely.
Who was it said was it Kara? Was that you who said you just watched it for the first time?
No, it was me.
Kelsey. Yes.
Yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Yeah. Kelsey, what did you think of the newest ones, the Disney made ones?
I didn't think that they were terrible, but they definitely didn't reach my expectations based on what I had watched of the older ones. So I'm definitely with the clan that's like, the new ones are kind of not that great.
Yeah, the way they treated Luke Skywalker's character in The Last Jedi, like it rubbed me the wrong way after.
They subverted your expectations.
They sure did. All right, they sure did. Right. Yeah, I mean, here's a question for you guys, bouncing off of this. Of course, now we have the sci-fi and fantasy genres, right? These are both key genres within our entertainment medium. Beowulf probably helped inspire a lot of high fantasy that we still have today, right? We have Lord of the Rings, right? All the Tolkien mythology. Well, Tolkien translated Beowulf. Right? We have the Game of Thrones, right? That's a very big high fantasy art.
I don't know if this is 100% or not, but I heard that the dude that helped create Skyrim actually drew from Beowulf's Dragon 2 and stuff with the creators of Skyrim.
About Bethesda and Todd Howard, them guys.
Yeah. Probably so, right? Because the dragons are the antagonists of Skyrim. Yeah, for those of you who've played that game.
I appreciate the how it paved the way for things that come forward. Just in and of itself, I still feel like it's kind of basic.
Right. Well, it's an amazing cultural artifact. I think the fact that we even still have it, right? Like I said, it almost died. It almost was lost to us forever. I think it's an amazing story too that we're reading it today. Like if you were taking this class in 1800, right, you probably wouldn't have read this because they didn't even know it existed. So it's one of the few artifacts we have about the Anglo-Saxons, right? Just because they didn't have a lot of written literature, right? There was some, but not much, right? So it's definitely a product of a bygone era and of a bygone language. The Old English language is dead. There's no Old English anymore. People don't speak it. The closest thing to Old English is Welsh. You go to northern England in Welsh. Is still a dialect that's very much sort of it's very close to Old English. So that's probably the closest thing we have to it today.
So what one of your questions in your prompt for discussion was about why is this this tale so important to be taught and how important it is to literature as a whole. I was wondering I didn't really know how to answer that and chose to do something else.
Well, and somebody else want to take that question up? Why do we read this? Why is this usually the first thing you read in British Lit? Besides the historical timeline.
I just assumed because it's one of the most popular ones that everybody knows, but that's what I assumed it was just because where it was so popular and it's went through so many centuries, different generations and everything that to still be standing. I think that's why it's up there to be like one of the first ones you read.
I think it might be, as we said, how Beowulf is kind of a building block for the hero archetype. I think that is honestly one of the main reasons. It's a good introduction to this pattern, and it's a good way to begin your understanding of it, to me personally.
My answer to that would be I find it extremely compelling because it's an epic poem, but was it influenced by other epic poems? Right? Arguably not. Right? Whoever told this tale, I don't think was familiar with the Iliad or the Odyssey or something like that. There's no allusion to it anywhere, or the Greek gods or anything like that. So the fact that this was an epic that was completely removed from the whole other part of the Western world, right? Western culture is dominated by the Greeks, right? We still are, right, in many ways. So I just find it really interesting from that perspective, right?
Yeah, if I could judge this through a completely objective lens with that knowledge, I would probably appreciate it a lot more because, I never really thought of it that way. If they didn't have anything really to draw upon, and this is pretty much genuine, non-plagiarized ideas, if you will. That's awesome, actually.
I agree. I think it reflects what a lot of what the Anglo-Saxon people viewed as glory and what the everyday person, you know, what they kind of aspired towards. Because with any kind of literature, it's not written, it's written for everyday people. It's usually not like, you know, going to go through your everyday actions, what, you know, everyone does, the norm. It's kind of the little bit of fantasy that we all aspire to have. And that was their fantasy. So I hadn't thought of that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, this is a text that represents that entire culture's values, right? About honor and glory and not being a coward, right? Fighting for your people, fighting for your homeland, right? These are, I mean, some of that is still with us today, but for them, those were the key values that made their culture what it was, right? Today we have much different sets of values, but still those are still with us to some extent too. So I think you're right about that. Very good, very good. This is your one peek behind the curtain for the Anglo-Saxons before 1066, when the French brought Western culture with them into England, right? So besides Christianity, Western culture besides Christianity, I should say. Christianity is also infused with Greek, and especially the New Testaments, infused with Greek culture too. So from here on out, you guys will get lots of references to the Greek gods and Roman mythology too, and all that good. Usually moving forward in British lit, you got if there's allusions to that, it'll usually be the Roman names instead of the Greek names. So you'll, instead of Zeus, you get Jove or Jupiter, right? Instead of what's Aries, you get Mars, right? So you'll have to familiarize yourself moving forward with the Romanized names of the Greek gods. So just to give you a heads up, right? The reason for that is England tied themselves back with Rome, right? A lot of English, we'll talk more about this soon, but a lot of English nationality stemmed from Rome, right? The Romans traced themselves back to the Trojan War with the character of Aeneas, right? Who's just this random guy who left Troy and went to found the city of Rome. The British do the same type of thing, right? One of Aeneas's kinsmen goes to found England, according to that myth. So that's why they always go with Roman mythology instead of Greek, just so you guys know. So the story for Wednesday, just to give you a heads up, is Sir Gawain. It's an Arthurian tale. It's a medieval romance. I will talk about the romance genre on Wednesday more. But this is we talked about this being fantasy. This is definitely the fantasy genre too, right? One thing you can't do is you can't take it literally. Okay, so as you guys read, maybe think to yourself, what's the metaphor here? What for this story? Right? We talked about Beowulf's armor. What does Sir Gawain's armor represent? Right. So I think reading Beowulf gives you a nice way into Sir Gawain. So
is there better character development?
Yeah, I would say so. It's about Arthur's Knights of the Round Table. That Sir Gawain is like one of the most, he's, whenever you talk about the Knights of the Round Table, we talk about like the Lancelot. He's usually the main one that we talk about. Sir Gawain is this kind of like one that nobody ever talked about until the story, right? He's just the random dude on the round table. Right, so it kind of gives you a nice peek behind. This guy's not the strongest knight. He's not the boldest knight.
He's not Richard Gere from First Knight.
Yeah. Yeah, that Sean Connery was Sir Arthur in that, King Arthur in that movie, if I remember.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, there's also a Sir Gawain in the Green Knight film with Sean Connery as the Green Knight. I'll have to find a clip and show it to you Wednesday. It's really disturbing in many ways. But
I'm not familiar with that.
what happens is they're having a Christmas feast, as you guys will find out, and this guy who's completely green, his skin's green and everything, comes in and disrupts the whole thing. Right? And then adventure ensues from there. So that's my hook to get you to come back and read on Wednesday and talk about Sir Gawain. Okay.
For me to read the whole story?
Just part 1 and 2, the first half. We'll read part 3 and 4 next Monday. Okay. All right. So I will look forward to discussing that with you guys. A good class today. Like I said, let's pick up those discussion posts a little bit. Everything will be swell. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. So before you guys go, just let me make sure I have everybody for attendance today. So
I do have a question about the discussion post. When we use text, do you want us to include the text or just the page number, within the discussion post?
So whenever you quote from the
Like
text,
the line.
yeah, whenever you quote from the text for these poems, put the line number. So like, is it maybe on Beowulf, it would be line 2550 to 54. Right?
Okay, I got you.
Put the line number in the in-text citation after. So that's a good question. Later in the class, we'll do page numbers, but for poetry, especially these long poems, it's conventional to quote the line number. Okay, so good question, Jacob. I'm glad you asked that. Usually the rule is try to keep your quotes. Well, when you're actually writing a real paper, you usually try to keep your quotes a little shorter. I don't care about a discussion board post. All I care about a discussion board post is you give me some stuff in the text. Right. But later in the class, we'll talk about when we do our papers, keeping your quotes at a minimum is just only quoting what you need is key there. But for discussion posts, give as much as you need to make your point. All right.
Another question as far as quotes go. I know that you can omit some parts of a quote by, having like ... and then picking it up again. Do you mind that? Or do you want like everything from that little section that we're using?
I do not mind that. You can use ellipses to to give only what you want from a quote. Right. So you can leave things out with the ellipsis. Yeah, so that's a good question too. You don't have to quote 20 lines to make your point, right? Quote from those 20 lines the few things you do want to make the point with. Right. It's a good question there too. Like I said, I'm not asking for much. Just anchor yourself in the text and these discussion responses. That's all I ask. And that's the whole center of literary studies. You always have to anchor yourself in the text. So, anything else before we depart? All right, guys, good class. I enjoyed it. So, we'll see you guys next time.